stranger showed up to a broken town, and the town made them one of its own. This is Means of Play. Welcome to Means of Play. I am Ian, or Cozy Tea Pastor, and with me is Nate, Nerd Pastor Nate, and we are grateful to be back together talking about some games. Every week, we pick a game, and we read it the way that we might read a sacred text, which is to mean we read it slowly, we read it together, and we read it with the assumption that it has something to teach us about being human. These are not reviews, these are not takes, it is a reading. And today, we'll be reading Fields of Mystria. Before we get into the game for today and the reading, we want to start with the way that we normally do, which is with a little bit of gratitude. Just a time to check in, to settle in to where we are. And if you're listening or watching in the car, at your house, on your couch, wherever you are, you can also join in with us in this time. So we're going to start with, what are we grateful for? What's something in the last week that we are bringing with us today that's brought us some light, some joy, some hope? Who wants to go first?
Yes, the classic, the pastoral Bible study question.
Lead by example, right? This week, I'm grateful. I would say last week, I was able to get a couple days away and did a little spiritual retreat with a few other pastors, something I tried to do every summer, done the past few summers, and has been really meaningful, helpful for me just to take a step away from the normal rhythms of life to just be with some other pastors. We do some planning, some learning, growing, and just have some fun together too. So really grateful for that. Just a few days to come back and feel a little more rested and restored and excited for the next 6 months or a year. So grateful for that. What about you, Nate?
Nice. Well, it'll have been a little bit of time by the time this episode releases, but my wife and I are celebrating our 10-year anniversary. And so that is a milestone for us that we are just incredibly grateful for, and just grateful to have somebody by my side. So it is an encouragement every day to be able to be a part of somebody's life in that way, and I'm just grateful for it.
That's amazing. My wife and I have 10 years next year, so
very exciting.
Right behind you.
That's an exciting year for sure. Well, today we are going to be talking about Fields of Mystria, and the reason for that is that this is a game that, like many farming sims, is going to hand you an overgrown farm. It's going to hand you a broken town, and it's going to invite you to stay long enough to belong. You arrive as a volunteer here in a town that has suffered from a tragic earthquake, and you inherit someone else's damaged inheritance, collapsed bridges, sealed mines, a community that maybe used to be more than it is now. And thus begins the infamous farming loop. You will be farming, fishing, mining, gifting, socializing, festival going, cooking, maybe even playing some D&D. The arc here is a stranger becoming a native to a place that is being tended through repair, through community growth, and through, of course, returning seasons and many, many hours of gameplay. So that's the wager of this episode. The move that turns this from more than just a farming sim into something actually worth reading is what sets this game apart from its peers, and that is this inciting incident of the earthquake itself, a disaster that reveals some things in the community and that also gives you a reason to be there. So we want to read this game as a game about restoration. We don't want to read it about a hero complex, but instead we want to read it about repairing something, the slowness with which that takes, and just the importance of showing up, maybe even as an act of holiness. But before we get into our conversation about this one, at the end of each of these episodes, we tease the next episode with a question. And so the question that we asked you in our last episode on Coffee Talk Tokyo was in regards to this episode about Fields of Mystria. And the question we asked was the impossible choice of if you could only pick one of the farming sim elements, would you pick farming, socializing, mining, or fishing? This episode is actually releasing before we've seen your comments, but I am eager. I am waiting with bated breath to see what people say, and I'm curious to know what yours is, Ian. Which of the four? Or are you going to throw in a surprise fifth option that we didn't even consider?
Yeah.
Really into cooking.
Yeah, there is one other one that I feel like is more generic, but like this is tough. I do know that, like, not to knock on these, but like I know that social is like not my number one. I know that it's not that one. I do enjoy some of the social, but it's definitely not my go-to. And I think we were talking before, maybe after the episode, and I was like, I don't know about mining. But actually, after playing some more Fields of Mystria, mining might be the one that I would go with out of this list. If I were to add one, it might be something to the effect of like crafting. I do really like that aspect, which is usually like the follow-up to mining. You get the resources, but then you get to use the resource to make something new. So it's kind of that whole rhythm. But I think out of these four, I might actually go with mining, which is not what I thought.
It's a very visible progression with mining and with crafting. You have like almost like idle mobile game level of like knowing how much is left and how far you've come, which is different from the others, I guess. Well, hilariously enough, I am going to claim social because that is what sets a farming game apart for me. Is my favorite farming game of all time is Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life, which I went back and played not too long ago after having played Stardew for literally hundreds of hours. And, you know, it's interesting just how small that town is. There is so little to do in A Wonderful Life, but I think it has some of my very favorite characters in any farming sim. They are so realized, even though they only have just a few voice lines whenever you actually get down to brass tacks, probably less than any of the other games. Something about them made them feel so fleshed out. Their routines, maybe the role that they played at a very particular part in my life. So that's one for me. It's also the one that has a very not quick. I mean, at the end of the first year, but spoilers for a like 2003 or 2004 game. There's a death at the end of the first year, and that was such an interesting theme to me. Was this idea of like, what do you mean farm sim characters can die? They're supposed to be eternal so that I can have all of the opportunities to schmooze them, but. No, that was a twist that nobody expected. So something about I think the tie to a life is what set that one apart for me. And what really ties down a life is socializing, the social element. So yeah, maybe that makes me not a very gamey gamer, but it is what it is.
Nah.
Yeah. With that, let's get into the meat of this episode. So the thesis we're going to be running with is this idea that you, the player, don't restore a place. A person doesn't restore a place, but rather it is restored through time and community and showing up again and again. And so the way we wanted to kind of start this conversation was with a look at that really first part, which is time. What sets apart all farming sims, I think, from most other games, is that they have an active calendar. They have an active kind of routine. You're working through a day-night cycle. You're expected to go to bed at a certain time. It is really tied to the calendar, to the day, to what is expected of you during that day. There are literal seasons baked into farming sims, and Fields of Mystria that is certainly true for as well. There are crops that will grow only in spring or only in summer or only in fall. Not many crops at all will grow during winter, appropriate to real life. And so I thought it was interesting for us to begin the conversation in probably the broadest terms with something that applies kind of as a blanket statement to farming sims in general. And of course, Cozy Tea Pastor's bread and butter. cozy games, which are tied to a certain sense of the mundane and the ritual and the routine. So, yeah, what are your thoughts there as the resident cozy expert?
Yeah, I think you kind of covered it really well of this ritual that happens in Fields of Mystria, but it happens in farming sims and so many cozy games. Is there are these tasks that we are given, gifted, assigned, and in some ways limited by, but the limitation is also like a sense, I think, of freedom in a strange way. So, in this game, we can use as an example, since we'll be talking about it, is you, as you said, you inherit this farm, which means you have some tasks already handed to you, which the first is let's plant some crops. And of course, crops take watering and you have to watch them. And whenever, if a crop takes 4 days to then produce something, then you have to harvest those crops. And whether you want to sell them or use them to cook, those are the next kind of routines, rituals and rhythms to follow. But then you also have your tasks of socializing, connecting to the community. So you kind of, as each day goes by, which is also set on a timer, I think Fields of Mystria is around 20 minutes for a day, something like that, is you find yourself in these kind of rhythms of the day. I know for me it was I get up and I always check the crops first. I check, do they need to be watered? If it's raining, that checks off one thing on my list. I don't have to water them.
Mm-hmm.
But if I need to plant anything else or harvest anything, I do that. Then, if I need to store them, whatever, then I'll go into town, talk to some of the neighbors, find out if there's any letters in my mail, any rewards I need to pick up, any other tasks that people are looking for help on. So you start to build this rhythm of daily life, and it does, in a strange way, it can mirror, the life that we live if we find ourselves in those rhythms. But I think there is, I don't know, there's a comfort in that. There's a groundedness to it that these days move quickly. They don't move at the length of like an Animal Crossing where the day in the game is the same as your day in real life, but that you find a home in the repetition, that you find a peace in the repetition. You may not hand structure your day like I structure my day in Fields of Mystria, but we do all find our own structures that bring us comfort or efficiency or whatever it is that we need. I think these games really ask us to find the structure that works for us best. And then we get to mix and match, if we want to spend a day fishing, we do that. If we want to spend a day mining, do that. But there is still a ritual that kind of grounds, there's a rhythm that grounds that. And then the bigger rhythm of the seasons that really do mirror some aspects of life, but that maybe are a little more, there's less surprises in them, which can be very healing. Life has a tendency to provide more surprises than a game can, and so there's something I think comforting about that rhythm as well. But I know you're also a farming sim guy, so
Oh yeah.
I'm curious to hear also, what is it about the ritual, what is it about the rhythm that you find particularly meaningful?
Yeah, I think you tapped on a lot of the important parts. And I think there is this this reality of just showing up and continuing to show up. There's a mantra that I've started to kind of almost right on the back of my eyelids. I say it so much at this point, but it's particularly alleviating for my ADHD. And that is this idea that if you bring the body, then the brain will follow. Sometimes ADHD folks have trouble getting to tasks, actually starting a task. But if you'll actually just bring your body to the place where that task happens, then you'll be surprised at how much you can get done just by being there. And I think that there's an element of that to these games. Like often with modern gaming, there's this like dopamine hit of giving you a task and letting you check it off. But farm sims, now granted, there is renown in Fields of Mystria, so they are leaning into some modern game mechanics. But for the most part, like the farm sim is a self-imposed kind of schedule. And a restrictive schedule at that. I'm sure that there are a lot of people, like if you aren't somebody that really values the social elements, then you might not make it a priority to go and talk to everybody in town every day and to get that box checked off because it's not a part of your routine. Some people might play more as like a hermit who have your little farm and you do your things and you go in your mind and then you go to bed. And I've certainly played seasons of those games in that way. But like everyone has a slightly different structure because everybody has a slightly different idea of like, what does it mean to show up in this town? What does it mean to keep consistent with this schedule? And so we build in our heads this like ritualistic system of what is it to quote unquote show up? And how much of our capacity can we bring to that fray? And I think there's something really intriguing in the kind of religiosity in that I think that there is like, I don't know the word I want to put behind it, but like even in like ancient church history, right, there was like the times that you would have these like times of day where everyone would gather in the chapel and pray, like in a monastic society. They might gather at this time and then they would pray. They would gather at this time for a meal. They would gather at this time for this kind of thing. But they always had like a very rigid practice of what their schedule for the day looked like. And even in like the Wesleyan heritage, like if you ever go and read John Wesley's journals, like the dude had a schedule, had a practice, had a thing, had a way that he showed up, a time that he did certain things, and was like down to a science of how much that day was going to be spoken for. And I think all of that is then connected to how we show up in our own lives and in our own routines. Certainly as a parent, that is very true. Like I have got it baked into my mornings of like, I have to get up at this time because if I don't get up at this time, breakfast doesn't get made. If breakfast doesn't get made, then the kids are hungry. And then I have to give them a snack and snacks are not as good for them as a breakfast would be. Then I got to get them to school and then I got to go to work and then I got to, check in on them there and pick them up at this point. Like it becomes this very much like important routine baked into our lives. That is a representation of like how we're showing up for people, how we're showing up for a community.
Yeah, and there is an embodiment to that even in the games. I've found like that also can feel like you talked about, where your body goes and your mind can follow is like once you get into those rhythms, I can even find the muscle memory in the controller, right? Of like, I get up, I know I move to this place first, and then I move to the next place. And like, there is a physicality of like those little motions of like, yeah, now I know I want to go to this, I want to go to the general store. So I'm going to like move this direction. And it becomes, I think, it feels like you're playing the same level over and over again in a way. But there's also the freedom within those movements to break out. I remember the first time on Friday nights, they have like there's a Friday night gathering in Fields of Mystria at the inn. And so everybody, I think it's at 6 p.m., everybody goes to the inn. And so you look on your map and it's just everybody's there. And so I remember they told me about that the first time. And I'm like, I'm in my routine. I'm locked into my schedule. And then they say, oh, tonight we're going to be here. You should really come. And I'm like, all right, I guess. Like it's kind of throwing off, my plan for the day. But you get there and then you find these other kind of rituals in that of people gathering, people coming together. There's like a D&D table going on. There's another one that they're just, talking about whatever random things for the day. You can see what food people might be ordering. You get a free drink when you get in. It's those moments of then community ritual. It's not just your individual ritual, but it's like how your routines and your rhythms then, I think, fall into the rhythms of the broader community, the festivals that come up, the places and times where people gather, that make, I think, what you're doing feel more connected to the people around you, which again, as we've already said, mirrors life itself, right? We have our rhythms, we have our, schedules and routines that need to happen to make it through each day, and also how those things relate to other people. That when I'm, going into the office as a pastor, right, I'm showing up at a church where there's other things happening that I might not be directly involved with all the time, but when the food pantry is going on at the same time, that's some other people's, that's their rhythm for Monday morning. And so how does my rhythm in the office connects to their rhythms and what's going on those moments for them? And so there's this overlap of these like community rhythms, that are all interconnected.
Yeah, it's an interesting echo of last week's episode, where we dropped a potentially churchy term that we weren't sure if we needed to define or not, and that is third space, which is like if your first space is home, your second space is work, then third space is this ethereal other thing, which is like a place of gathering. And I had not considered that like the inn and that Friday night is teaching you about like not only that third spaces exist, not only that there are gathering spaces, but also that they too have their own ritual baked in. I find that really fascinating. I had not considered that part of the story. That I think like from the game development, side of things, they were like, no, we need to give people a reason to play another week. Like we're trying to give them that like, that tease of, oh, you got to show up next Friday to know what happens next in the D&D campaign, or like see what happens whenever March accidentally gambles well again, like, or not March, but the older brother. Like you got to find out what happens whenever the like, the doofus somehow manages to win another hand. So like, yeah, like they want you to keep showing up, and that's their impetus, but also like the broader story being told on like a meta level, or maybe not a meta level, but a like true narrative level, is the reality of ritual, and the reality of ritual even baked into our third spaces. So
Yeah.
So I feel like we could talk about this for a long time.
Yeah, we could keep going forever. But I think those rituals do mean something to the story that's also happening in Mystria and then the world that you find yourself in. So Nate set us up earlier, but just to recap, the way the story begins is that an earthquake has come through and really torn Mystria apart. There's the town is still intact, but it seems like the spirit of the community is broken. There's a bridge that has been broken, which is kind of their connection to other towns and villages, which means they feel isolated. The mines are not currently usable. They're having to rethink who they are because they've things are missing. Things are broken, and it seems like they're in some ways irreparable. But at the same time, something happens in that moment. You come in to start, you take on this farmland that's overgrown, you start tending to it and caring for it, and then just maybe a day or two in, it's very early, you, along with another character, one of the main characters, take down this tree, and behind the tree is this statue of a dragon, and you start to learn through that statue and other things that's something about the earthquake also created a crack in the world, so that the magic that had kind of been tucked away, had been covered up in Mystria, is now starting to come back out, and there is more magic in the community than there was before. And you start to learn about the mechanics and the ways of tuning into and learning from, and kind of skill building with that magic around you. And so the disaster happens, and at the same time, or right after, there is something that hopeful, I would say, that starts to come out of it. Now, what we don't want to say here is the kind of line of like everything happens for a reason, right? We're not trying to say that a disaster in a community is actually a good thing. That's not what we want to say here. What we want to understand is that bad things can happen, that tragedies can happen, that earthquakes can happen. Things can disrupt our lives in harmful ways. And there is room in the aftermath of these things for the magic to kind of come back in, for hope to come back in, for the divine to be at work. It doesn't mean that the thing that was bad is now good, but that good might actually be able to come after, and that there is hope to be found beyond what feel like hopeless events. Nate, what have you kind of like grabbed onto in this story device that you uncover as you're doing your rituals and your rhythms and you're starting to expand the world and maybe put things back together?
Yeah, I think there's a couple interesting things going on in the story underneath the story. That's something that this game, I think, does in a really good way as opposed to just about any other farm sim that I've ever played. And that is that there is like this deep-seated kind of lore going on. And so there's this implication that maybe magic has existed before, maybe not, but it's at least become a thing that like any normal villager now would not believe in magic. Like they would not be somebody that would assume that this is a reality. There's also this like mysterious thing going on at the bottom of the mines that caused them to be sealed up. And it's like, well, was that a mystery, or was that people knew what it was and they were telling you not to mess with it, not to poke the bear, so to speak? And then, of course, there's the mysterious statue that is a talking dragon that is somehow, for some reason, chosen you. And so all of those things are kind of dancing around this same factor of a real temptation to call this like, a fortunate fall, to call this a sort of like what is being put about by this inciting incident. And so I think that's why I keep using that particular turn of literary phrase as like, I want us to practice our media literacy and call it what it is and say that this is not a fortunate moment. This is not something that is like a blessing in disguise, but rather that it is something that instead just kind of shook up the dust, made a bit of a stir in things that then brought about change. So a change agent to me is different than a like net positive good. And I think that we could even turn to like, I feel like the first person that I can recall that really called out that everything happens for a reason and the negativity behind that sentimentality was Kate Bowler, fantastic author and historian and theologian. And she presents in a really powerful way this like instance of her own diagnosis of cancer, and how no matter how much like churchies, Christianese, kind little church ladies telling her like everything's going to be okay, everything happens for a reason, like, no, it doesn't. Her cancer diagnosis did not happen for a reason, and she's going to refuse that outright. And so again, that moment in her life is no doubt something that has caused a lot of stir in her. She's a survivor. She is writing, and a lot of the work that happened there happened after her diagnosis. And so there's a temptation there for people to be like, see, everything happens for a reason. It gave you this successful career. And I know she would eschew that and scorn it, of like, no, I refuse to give this any more credence than what it is, which is perhaps as an inciting incident, perhaps as a change agent, but ultimately just as a reminder like any other thing that happens. And it brings about this really important church term of theodicy, of trying not to put God into any kind of a box of our own human understanding, even whenever it comes to moments of turmoil. And instead, it being far more about the XYZ happened, comma, now what? That becomes the more important, like theological work, social work, the actual life that we're called to. And so a lot of this goes into our kind of last thought on this game, which is the role of the player in the midst of this. If we are if it's a cause and effect situation, if we are the effect of this cause, if the inciting incident brought about a reason for us to be there, and to do all the things that we do, then what is our role? What becomes that thing? And the role that the game seems to be giving us is one I think of a positive social inhabitant. You're a part of this community. You're another person, another cog in the machine of society that is progressing things forward. If we want to continue going with the kind of Wesleyan thought, like there is no holiness but social holiness. There is no pursuit of a better life but that happens in community and in connection with the people around you and in making their lives better as well. In our call to like acts of piety and our call to acts of mercy, like that directly involves doing good for others and stopping harm from being done to others. And that becomes like what it means to be a part of this society. And I hope, we'll see 1.0 drops, just before this episode drops. And so we'll see where they actually kind of go with this story and if they're going to make the player some kind of like hero motif or if they're going to continue to allow the player to be a part of something bigger, a part of this rather than some kind of, mythic figure.
Yeah, I think the role or like beginning to like understand who you are as a character in this community starts very early on of like, and helps to address this question of like, what do you do in the wake of and in the midst of pain, of suffering, of loss like this? And the biggest thing that your character does, particularly in the story points, is just keep showing up. When people are coming together, when conversations are happening, I think about like pretty early on, it's like that connection of like the bridge to other places has been broken. So how do we fix it? And you show up. You are just there as one of the people to help bring this together. And so, not as an answer necessarily to these questions, not a clear answer, maybe, not as refuting these or denying the pain that's there, but to say our response is to be a presence in the midst of them. And so your role is one who shows up, but you're not the only one who shows up, which I think is really beautiful. There are so many video games where, right, you are the protagonist, you are the hero, you are the one that the weight of the world is on your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And here, the weight of Mystria is not totally on you. You have a role to play. When you're fixing the bridge, right, your role is to get the supplies. But it's someone else's job to finance it. It's someone else's job to actually build it. It's someone else's job to help connect everybody together to make sure this happens. You have a part to play, but you're not the sole hero. And I don't even think you're really celebrated as one. You are obviously thanked as a part of it, but it's not just on you. And in fact, it's better. The community seems to find more healing and more connection in the fact that it's not just on you. And it does also leave this interesting tension that I think is not just Fields of Mystria, but it can be kind of in a lot of different farming sims or cozy games like this, is like, what does that mean about who you are in the game? And you do have some like options and different paths to take in a way. But your identity is not as fixed as, a first person kind of adventure game often is, right? It's not as fixed as a Legend of Zelda kind of. You're not Link in that way. But you are another person that doesn't. You have dialogue options, but you have choices you can make. You have ways you can play, but your role is not so fixed, and it's kind of on you to figure out what that means. What this game really means for you. And it, at least at my point in this game, there's not a clear answer. And I think that's okay. the tension is good.
Yeah, and to tug on that thread, the tension is real, and the tension is something that we were also dealing with, to peek behind the curtain and say we couldn't really figure out how to land this one because of the fact that there is so much history, I think, built up in the player in a farm sim. You're kind of building yourself up in main character syndrome, where everything is about you, everything revolves around you. You are the hero, you are the one pushing all of this forward, and that just doesn't feel like the healthiest kind of argument for a game that is built around like a society, around a small town, around something that is thriving. Like, that's not real life. No matter, how much you try, you're not going to be the center of attention in your town. You probably don't want that. And what actually makes whether that's a church or whether that's a group that you're a part of, or whether that's like a gaming group or a Discord or whatever, like small group you're a part of, like the more important part of being a part of a community is not to be the center of it, but rather to be a part of it, to be a part of this like bigger quote unquote body, this representative thing that we're trying to do. And I think we can think through like some of the worst characters and whether they be fictional or real life, some of the worst characters in life are the ones that force everything to be about them. That kind of narcissism is like explicitly meant as a negative. And so, a lot of the ways that you can read this game and just about any other game is by allowing the player character to become a narcissistic extension of like the ego. And we didn't want to do that. And so we kept like debating. We were like, how do we do this? Because we want to make sure that we don't like give into that system, but we also want to give like a fair way of reading this game, a fair way of presenting, because that's what we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to figure out what does it mean to read a game? What does it mean to provide like literacy towards gaming? And the reality of that is that sometimes the hero kind of sucks. And that sometimes that's okay to name, and that other times the game gives us the option to be something more. And this is an example where I think we landed on the player character very much has an opportunity in this game to not see themselves as the center of attention, and that's worth pointing out.
Yeah, and it goes back to where we started, which was with this idea of time. And I think the way that Fields of Mystria, but also like cozy games and farming sims restrict you, and to say you can't speedrun these. You can't force yourself into a hero role. You can't force yourself through the story. You can't force yourself through relationships. Like, you have to take it day by day. You can't make the day go faster either. I think there's a way to maybe make it go a little slower, but like, you can't speed up this progress of time, which again, I think reflects very much real life. You can't speed run community. You can't master it in a couple of days, right? It takes this energy of showing up over and over again, of putting in time, of putting in our whole selves to be a part of that restoration, which again brings us back to where we started and where we'll kind of wrap up, which is that you, on your own, you don't restore a place, but it is restored through these things, through time, through community, and through showing up together. And with that, we are running out of time on our episode. So we're gonna close there. But we will close as we do regularly, which is with a few questions, a few things to ground us before we go. And again, these are invitations. We're going to answer these questions. We also invite you to answer them for yourself. Maybe it's out loud in a journal in your head, or if you want to answer in the comments on YouTube video, that would be great. We'd love to read them. But just a couple ways to check in this week. And so the first is from Nerd Pastor Nate's community at Checkpoint Church is, how did you checkpoint this week? How did you show up online?
So mine is shameful, but I'll start. And that is to say that I have started playing a new idle game about Digimon called Digimon Up. And I'm part of a fantastic guild. and I am showing up for that guild. It has been so long since I've participated in an online chat, and it's been really fun to just like be with complete strangers and just be talking like gaming metas and how to raise the best Digimon. So that's what I've been getting up to and how I have felt meaningfully seen in community online. How about yourself?
I love that. I think it was like a day or two. I think it might have been yesterday. There's someone in their stories had started playing Blueprints, which is something my wife and I have been kind of playing through together, and trying to figure out those sometimes very frustrating puzzles as a team. But they started playing and were just like, "Is someone out there playing this game? I want to talk about it." So I sent them a message, and we were chatting a bit about just some of the gameplay and some of the puzzles, and so that was just a fun little moment in the day to chat about a game that I have loved deeply and also is difficult, and so it's good to know when you're not alone in the struggle. So that was meaningful. But the second question is about my community, my work in Cozy Gaming, Cozy Tea Church, is how are you cozy this past week? Where did you find rest, a place to catch your breath? Where'd you find that?
It's been a long time, but my wife and I did a puzzle. And it was very simple. It was only a 500 piece. We were really hoping that our oldest daughter could participate with us, but she is not quite there yet and got real frustrated. So the 500 piece was a bit too much for her, but it was just the right amount for us to not get overwhelmed. And man, I forgot just how like relaxing it is to just stare at a puzzle for, an hour and some change and not think about the worries of the world for just a minute.
Yeah. Channeled your inner Winston.
Right.
Puzzle. For me, I think when I was on the retreat last week, I kind of went back into, I had already played through the main story or most of the main story of Pokemon Leaf Green when it re-released on the Switch, but went back to it, continued to play kind of the post-game Sevi Island stuff, get some of that, and then spent a couple hours catching all 28 different variants of Unknown. And it was very restful in a way. Like there were frustrating parts. There were a couple that are 1% encounter rates, but I don't know. Something about it was just kind of dropped my heart rate and just let me kind of get into a rhythm, and then the excitement of finding one. But yeah, really enjoyed that little side quest in a nostalgic Pokemon game.
A farming game about exclusively farming unknowns.
Yeah. We could. All right, that's for another time.
You were about to run with it.
Yeah.
You're like,
it's like, wait a second. Before we go, just remind you of what we've been talking about today with Fields of Mystria, that you don't restore a place, but spaces are restored through time, community, and showing up. And we do hope that you have found some meaning in this conversation and that you want to keep showing up, as we've really enjoyed showing up together and talking about this stuff. If you want to find more about us, you can go to meansofplay.com. Also follow us on whatever podcast place you listen, or on YouTube. And to preview, to get prepared for the next episode, we are going to be playing and reading a game I haven't played yet, but I'm going to play in preparation. But setting up with a question. The game itself is not Rock Band. I want to be very clear. But to prepare us, if you are a Rock Band enjoyer or have been, what was your instrument of choice? Were you on the guitar? Were you on the drums? Or did you stick to the mic? What was your instrument of choice? Love to hear about it. Until next time, till our next episode, may you find a means of play.